No, no one there. But we're here. So I will say formally, good afternoon and greetings to you. You all know my name's Julie Costello, and I'm a long time PAVE person. And with some of you, all of you, most of you, we are well acquainted and long connected. And as you know, I've been absent for a while. So how come I'm here and addressing you now? It came to be that last year I was talking with Catherine and explaining the reasons for my long PAVE absence, as well as expressing my intentions for returning in 2021. And it was then she asked if I might talk about that, which had kept me away, and my experience of all that had come from these happenings. I was going to tell you a little bit of background, but if it gets too familiar or too much, then I'll just scroll forward. So a little bit about me. We were just talking about Lifeline, but one way I describe myself, and my mother used to describe herself, was a jack of all trades and master of none. And it is a sort of description, I think. We grew up, my brother and I, in Hobart, Tasmania, which, as you know, is very close to the bottom of the earth. And there were many relatives, all within Cooey. There were quite a lot of us. And it was a really nice childhood and way to grow up. I was a very industrious school person, and when I was 16, when I was 16, I was awarded a scholarship, and despite that, I found myself working in the University of Tasmania, but in the photographic section and not taking up the scholarship. And the photographic section back then was housed in an army hut, and there were a whole series of them in a new suburb. In a suburb, they were in the new building for the university. The University of Tas was moving campus from the city to this suburb, and so all the sciences were in the army huts, including the photographic section. And
which suburb was this?
This was in Sandy Bay, in Tasmania.
That's where the university was.
No, it was in the city to start with. And then it moved down to Sandy Bay. When I was there, there were a couple of permanent buildings, but all of science at that stage were in these army huts. And so the photographic section was housed in the army huts too. And it was really a wonderful place to be. And although not academic, it was a place of learning every which way. And the photographic section did work for every department in the university, but particularly physics and cosmic ray. And they worked on Professor Carey's continental drift and printed his thesis, and I worked on that by hand as well, not input, but making it printable. And so I really enjoyed working there. But it was while I was there that I was introduced to the University Dramatic Society, which was called the Old Nick Company. And it was called the Old Nick Company because I think in the late 1940s, the Old Vic had toured Tasmania before he was Sir, I think, Laurence Olivier and Janet Leigh. And so it was named Old Nick, inspired by Old Vic. Its motto was "Nothing is either good nor bad, but thinking makes it so," which Shakespeare thought up. It's a good motto. anyway, I was honoured to be an honorary student because I wasn't, to be an honorary member because I wasn't a student, and it was an honour, and it was through old Nick and also through the Hobart Repertory Society I became immersed, and they fostered my great interest and love, growing love of theatre and acting and all things dramatic. And I did love it, and I received another honour. I was accepted at NIDA, but I didn't find myself there. Instead, I found myself at Emerald Hill Theatre in South Melbourne under the tutelage of a wonderful man. And there were people there, I don't know if you've seen in the past John Derham or George Whaley performers, but they were there at the same time. And I lived and worked in a pub in Carlton, and Carlton then was a different sort of suburb. I understand what it is now, and I loved living in Carlton, and I loved living at the pub and pulling beer. And it was during the days of the 6 o'clock swing. Everybody had to be out at about 10 or 6:15, so time was called at 6. And in the public bar, at least, they would say 6 here, 5 here, 3 here, 8 over here. And it was a swill. It really was. And I was quite good at it. At the pulling of beer.
What was the name of the pub?
The Clyde.
The Clyde.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, it's still in existence,
Yes.
but it's not the
It
same.
just came out of Melbourne.
Yes.
And, yeah, before the lockdown. and
Yes.
also in Carlton.
Yes, I like being there, and I like being a barmaid, because the sort of suburb it was then, I felt I could walk around it and feel completely safe. It was a nice feeling.
It was in the 60s.
Yes. Mid-60s. Now, following those years of acting and performance, because they did pass, I went back to Tasmania to regroup and took myself off to learn typing and shorthand at the Miss Davis College in North Hobart. There were 2 Miss Davis. They were wonderful. At the time, I was very young and they seemed very elderly. And they were very straight, I remember. And they were absolutely wonderful. They ran this college in an old stone building in North Hobart. And I found myself there. I did typing there, and then I did shorthand with one of the Miss Davises. And we would do our lesson, which was one-on-one. And then she would say, I have a poem I found you might like, and disappear into the depths of the building and come back, and the rest of the lesson would be spent with the poem, and no more shorthand. And needless to say, that really delighted my soul. It was lovely. But I did take the shorthand to the ABC. Now, back in those days, my first ABC job, back in those days, one of the legitimate paths for women into the ABC was via the typing pool. So I did it. And I did graduate. I did graduate to general programs and production, post-production, and working with, there was a program called Line Up, which was one of the precursors of 7:30 Report and This Day Tonight, and etc. It was really back in the early 70s.
Is this still in Tasmania?
Yes, and it was still in the days where if I'd got married while I was there, I'd have had to leave. If you don't, gone are those days.
Yeah.
The ABC, just as a matter of, in that sort of area, there was a credit union, and if you wanted to borrow money from the ABC credit union, you couldn't until somebody else had paid their loan back. It was housed in a little house behind the ABC building.
In Altamont?
No. Oh, I did. No, I never worked in Ultimo. I did work at Gore Hill, but that was in Hobart in the early days of Hobart. Anyway, so then I decided to travel, and along the way, I sort of, wherever I was, I immersed myself in radio or television and audio as it happened. And in London, I found myself working for the then fledgling Capital Radio, and I was there so fortuitously in the days it was preparing to go to air. It was the first commercial FM music radio station.
In the middle of the ocean.
No,
That was
that was
Radio
Caroline.
that's right.
No,
Yeah.
but Kenny
Yeah, yeah.
Everett, who
Yes.
worked on
Yeah. I remember.
Caroline,
Yeah.
came and worked at Capital, and I made a commercial with him.
I remember Kenny Everett.
I loved Kenny Everett. Can I make a little sidetrack and tell you a Kenny Everett and Tim Rice story?
Oh,
Because
wow.
Tim Rice worked there too. He had a program once a week on Sundays, which was I think he was interested in 60s music. So one day I was in the production department at that time, and one day I was there over the weekend, and his secretary came to me, and they were laughing. She and Tim were laughing, and he had wanted to play something from Jesus Christ Superstar, and had left his own personal copy of it at home. So his secretary Jane went off to the record library to find it was signed out to JC. I'm Julie Costello, and it was called JC Superstar. So they found that very amusing, and I still quite like the story myself. But before that, Kenny Everett had asked me if he wanted to use it on air, and he'd asked me to get it for him. And that's when I signed out with the JC, so I've messed up the story. And then, so when I next saw Kenny, I asked him, did he have the record? And he said, "Oh no, gal, I lost it between the studio and the office," which meant he took it home.
Yeah.
But yes, I was very fortunate to work with these amazing people. Richard Attenborough was chairman. It was before he was Sir Richard Attenborough. He worked down the hall. He was very dapper,
Yeah.
and it was a chaotic and wonderful place to work, and one of the best experiences of my life. And that says a lot, because I've had fantastic experiences.
So that was London in the 60s and 70s,
London in the 70s, early
Wow.
70s.
before the oil crisis.
Yeah, yes,
Mid 70s was the oil crisis.
yes. There was, while I was there, a coal strike, and
Oh,
they
yeah.
went to a 3-day week.
I remember.
But I didn't, because I worked at Capital Radio. Capital Radio was considered an essential service.
Wow.
So I worked for, I was lucky to be there. In thinking about my life, there are so many times when I've somehow found myself in a place of that has been great fortuitousness, if that's a word. And that was one of them. When I went home, I came home with one of the engineers who built Capital Radio, and it wasn't too long before he built his own sound recording studio, and this is Jamie's dad. And I became very immersed in as a backup person in that area. But at the same time, before Jamie, I went back to the ABC and worked in some wonderful departments in rural news, sporting. I went to the Trots every Friday night, and the rugby. Yes, I think. And And I loved that too. But then that time came to an end and I spent more time at the studio. But I began a third ABC Life in 1995 or 1995, and that was my Four Corners life of 5 years. And that was another miracle because I didn't try to work at Four Corners. And yet I had long-time connections because I had friends who had worked there and been reporters and researchers. And it kept my connection with them. They weren't there anymore, but I really hadn't tried. All I was trying to do was work. And I found myself in Four Corners, and that was quite a time. I really feel very fortunate to have spent time there. I was a producer's assistant, a lowly job, but without whom they could not do without.
And
North
Cassie
Carolina
wasn't
dreams.
lonely.
I was acting production manager from time to time. I got Liz Jackson and her crew out of Indonesia at the time, the Suharto time when he was, and I didn't know how I was going to do it, and it turned out to be quite easy, but I was really afraid that they were stuck in there, and I was feeling a bit worried. But it was, again, the most stimulating place in the whole world to work. I loved it. But after I left there, I immersed myself in a few of my own interests, such as Reiki and yoga and decluttering and selling health supplements. And some of that I loved and I would like to do more of. But some areas of that I can only kindly say about myself is that it had mixed outcomes.
What, right?
Mixed outcomes of some of those areas, as in selling health supplements and other things. Some of them I like the Reiki and the
Still do
yoga.
the Reiki?
Not so much, more on myself, which is, yes, I like doing that. I might one day. Do you?
Love
It's-
Reiki.
Yes,
Feel it,
yeah,
Beautiful,
I love it too.
yes. And there's the big thing in the Blue Mountains.
I
You really have a good following.
Oh, that's interesting to know. Anyway, then Lifeline happened, and I have written here, for which I owe much gratitude to Leslie for her introduction and encouragement. And it became a time of great commitment, and I loved being there too. But when Lifeline time was up, I had the most joyous job of all of being a grandma. And that beats all of them. But on the way, I can't make sense of what I've written, but anyway, following that and the years that were to happen, I call them my animostos extraordinarios. It's one way of describing them because I don't know how else. And so they're the reason I haven't been here.
Looking after your grandchild.
No, they were there, but there were some unexpected happenings about to make themselves known, and it's quite personal, but we all have our personal stories and make them stories, and I think they're very important. This part of mine started on a January morning in 2014 when Jamie's brother, Lewis, came and took me off to his doctor because I had a condition most of my life, which was exacerbating itself. And that resulted in an appointment with a specialologist. And the appointment with the specialologist resulted in me having an appointment to have a hospital procedure. So, but instead of the hospital procedure, I was in the hospital, but in a different area because I had a mini stroke, a TIA, trans-ischemic attack, isn't it? And found myself in a hospital being wheeled in an ambulance by the ambos. It seemed it was because I had a dicky ticker, and I understood the dicky ticker because I realized it is not common, but there are members of my family who have dicky tickers and had TIAs and other issues. So I knew what was going on, sort of. I didn't make the other ologist until another 2 years had passed, because my dicky ticker kept stopping and starting, which was interesting because it would be a bit like a blackout. I could feel myself going black from here down. But it turned out my heart was stopping, thinking about starting, and then when it was ready, it would start again.
So when the pacemaker, they never thought about a pacemaker?
Oh yes, well that's the next thing, the
sorry.
pacemaker. After a 9 minutes, I'd be very dead. But 9 minutes, it stopped 9 seconds once when I was driving along the Hawkesbury Road towards Widmerley, and I just managed again. Somebody up there or whatever was looking, or whoever was looking after me, because I managed to pull over. Anyway, I was wearing a monitor as it was, and 2 days later, or whenever, I was getting emails in capital letters from the doctors and people saying things very loudly or letting me know that I had to go to hospital immediately. Wasn't it?
Yes.
If not sooner.
I should say so.
So Jamie took me, and it's a bit of a diversion, but I still remember the doctor saying to me, "You must be a bit overwhelmed," and words to this effect. But we're good at this, we do it all the time. Now those words, hold those words. I went to hospital via emergency and was in a single room. I'm presuming it was an ICU, I'm not sure. And everything attached to everything that bleeped and flashed. And it was on again, off again, on again, off again. They were fitting me in, and it was going to be on in one theatre, then another. And eventually it was decided that about 4 days hence from the time I was wheeled in, that it would be done. I'd be tagged on the end of an operation, a 4-hour operation on a Monday arvo. And so it all happened. And when I woke up, I knew things had gone a bit pear-shaped. I didn't feel very well, but I put it down to the anaesthetic. And they wheeled me up to a 4-bed ward. And I had the sense of the ward being closing in. It was still visitor time. And so all the main lights were off and just side lights were on. So there were huge shadows of people. And I can remember thinking, I don't know how I'm going to get through the night. And then I started bleating at everybody, I can't breathe. I'm in pain. And it turned out that things had gone pear-shaped, and the lead had punctured my heart muscle. And I had a really, truly bleeding heart.
Oh my God.
So they rushed around a bit and did lots of tests and put in a drain and had a nice nurse who held my hand. And there was it just seemed they did it there and there in the ward. It was a bit of an emergency and quite interesting to watch.
Was it Nepean Hospital?
Yes, and but I knew I could die, but I actually knew without thinking the words. But I didn't.
So we gather.
So here I am telling you about how pleased I am with it. I didn't. You were lucky, two of the doctors said to me. One of them said, you were lucky, they listened to you. And another doctor said, the surgeon, you were lucky that they had in place some policy that had meant you were checked up on. So it was one or the other or both, but I was lucky. I've lived to tell the tale. Anyway, there was some repercussions following that. I had what was called pericarditis, and it was triggered by these injuries, which were quite acute and unpleasant. And I found myself in hospital twice and slept it off another time. But following that, I discovered 2 lumpy lumps in a place where nobody ever wants to find a lumpy lump. Just a few days later, so all this is within a few weeks. So that turned out to be breast cancer. But because I had a pacemaker, I had to have a full mastectomy. But it was all simple, straightforward. The only treatment was a pill. Life went on, but with there were ongoing bouts of pericarditis from the heart. That was as a result when my heart. I have a condition also called atrial fibrillation, and when it goes too fast, it would upset the wound and cause pain. So it's gone now. I hardly ever have it. But it was a bit of a nuisance at the time. Anyway, I think time went by. All was fairly well until one day I found another lumpy lump in exactly the same position. Oh no, one was at 9 o'clock, the other was at 8 o'clock. The first lot were at 9, the second lot was at 8 o'clock on the side. So the whole process again, but this time it was much more complicated because it was a different sort of lump and a bit meaner and nastier and the sort that likes to spread himself around and make himself known. So Jamie got me to chemo, saw me through that and through the process of it all being worked out. And it did. Must have been a bit overwhelming. I don't know whether it must have been more overwhelming for you or me. But the meantime, I haven't been to pain.
I was going to say you're a walking miracle, really, aren't you?
Well, that's a nice thing to say. Yes, I'll keep that, Leslie. But it was the full thing.
I mean, you look amazing. As if you've been through all that. I mean, it's just.
Well, you've got to laugh, otherwise, and I don't know what else to do. I really am beyond.
You well now?
It's seriously knocked me about, hasn't it? I don't. The first things were the things you know about. I was completely bald. The hair grows.
Very quickly.
And very quickly, yes.
You never know you've lost all your hair.
Yes. Yeah, it was a little while ago, but
Yeah.
it's grown from
Yeah.
nothing to, I've been growing it. I had that. I developed lymphedema. That arm is bigger than that arm, but it was a lot bigger. I had to wear a sleeve and do exercises and things. But I also had to curtail my chemo because I was prescribed 12 rounds and I had 9 because it gave me peripheral neuropathy, which makes me feel as if my fingers and toes would fall off. And back then I fell down steps several times because my leg would switch off. I would be happily, minding my own business and then crash because I didn't have it felt as if I didn't have a leg. But
Is
that
the result of the chemo?
yes, chemo has very insidious.
Yeah.
It's life-saving. I
The side effects of the
but the side of it, and it does things to your head. Not at first, I didn't notice it, but I began to notice it by the time I was having radiation therapy. I began to feel very disconnected, and at first I felt as if I was attached to a sort of umbilical cord and was floating above the earth and was looking. And now it's changed. I've got no sense of time. Time is just is. There is no timeline. And so I cannot tell when something happened. I can mostly remember it happened, but I can't tell when it happened. And a sense of disconnection. And I've discovered one of my, one of the things that I do is tell myself what to do. When you get up in the morning, get up at 20 past whatever, you will do this, 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 and this, and what's more, you will enjoy it. And if I do that, I find myself doing it.
So it's
If
like
I-
a timetable. You
Yes.
set a routine.
I'm learning to do that, Peggy. I still haven't perfected it, but it's a triumph that I can do that because it overrides. Sometimes I just go into plain inertia and sit, don't I? And I'm just, and but I try and use the time by breathing, and that's where my yoga is coming. Oh, holding myself, breaking. It's much better than it was. It's much more than it was, but I don't know how much it will ever change. Now it's quite interesting to observe, but a bit another one of those nuisances that from
And
time
when
to time.
was this?
Mm?
When was it?
Oh, the surgery was at Christmas 2016. I actually came out of surgery.
Right.
I came home on Christmas Day, and then the treatments went all the way through 2017 and into 2018.
Right.
And now there are follow-ups and there's physio and scans, and so I don't so much have treatments for the cancer anymore, except when I go and see the physiotherapist, who is wonderful.
For the lymphedema.
Yes, yes.
Do they give you a massage? Because that's a big deal.
No, he taught me how to do it myself, but he works through things with me. And the best thing he does, Peggy, is talk to me
Awesome.
and listen. And he is the most cheerful person, but without being forced but he has a wonderful way of seeing things. So he's a physiotherapist on many levels, a therapist on many levels.
Is he with the public, European public? Or-
Yes,
Wow. Gonna meet
his
this
name's Glyndon,
Glyndon.
and I have a lot of time for Glyndon.
Lovely.
Meantime, along the way, there's still the Dicky Heart, and by this time I've gone to. I found the young man that saved my life in the hospital, and he is now out as a cardiologist by him all on his own for the last couple of years. So I found him, and because I had trust in him, because I suppose because he saved my life.
Yeah.
And I like going to him too. So between him and Glyndon, they're very cheering. For a long time, for a long, long, long time. The doctors and all the medical people and the nurses and all for 2 or 3 years, they were my social life, and I couldn't do anything else. There was no, I
Can choose.
yes,
Yeah,
yes, and family. I could only have time
yes.
for family,
That's
and
important.
it was all, yes, all my energies were in mending myself. They are still in some ways, I have to say. So Dicky Tickera, there's one other thing that I was a bit afraid might make itself known today, and expressed my fear to Jamie. A lot of Dicky bits of it have revealed themselves along the way. I've only talked about the most dramatic ones. But when was it? Earlier this year, I found myself having not quite hallucinations, but visual auras, which turned out, and I didn't realize, were a form of migraine. And I have had migraine in the past, and then I found out other conditions I'd had in my youth, and through the way called migraine equivalents. And I found a wonderful book by the most wonderful Oliver Sacks called Migraine, and I've delved into it. But that is because I'm not afraid of it anymore, and I was afraid because I've had migraines of the headache kind. I was afraid it might turn into the headache kind, but it hasn't. But it can be split vision. I have lost speech, haven't I?
Yeah.
That's scary.
Almost presented as a stroke.
Because Jamie was there.
Oh my goodness, what was it like?
I couldn't speak. The thing is, I knew what I wanted to say,
But it didn't come out.
but it wouldn't come out. And I was trying to send a message to Jamie's brother, because Jamie wasn't at home at the first instance. He came in
So
afterwards.
Lewis, you're trying to send
Yes, and I couldn't. And I ended up writing to him, help. And that must have scared
on the text message.
on the text message. That was
That's
all
amazing. That's a miracle. You could even do that.
Yes, he must have been having kittens, because he's in Tasmania.
I see. Then he rang Jamie.
Not Jamie walked in
Ah.
soon after that. And the thing is, these auras apparently can resolve themselves very quickly, and within 20 minutes to half an hour. And Jamie gave me some food.
Is it when your sugar level is low?
It could be. I don't know. I haven't figured it out yet, Peggy. I'm still figuring that one out, but it's quite interesting. One day I was going to the cardiologist that I was telling you about, and I realized before I left that I was getting these, they're like geometric shapes floating in different parts of the vision. And it's actually, once you get used to it, quite interesting to see what's going to turn up. But then but I was determined at that stage, I didn't know what was going on, and I was determined to get to the doctor, and I had to go by train because my car died last year. And I was walking down the street, and the street was in front of me and another street was coming into it. And then the vision split in two, and it was like those two pictures there that are on top of each other, but exactly
Double
the
vision.
same. That I had
That's
double.
vision.
So, but the road on top was on a slant. The road I was walking on was just the road, and I was weaving my way down the road to the station. I've got to get there. And I did. And by the time I got to the station, it had passed. But it was the most extraordinary experience. So I've been a person who's had these really most extraordinarious.
Was that a mini stroke?
No, I don't think so. I think it was a migraine equivalent called a classical migraine or migraine aura. I don't think that was a stroke, but we weren't sure if I had a stroke last year. Were we?
No. The hospital wasn't quite sure either.
Yes, Jamie had to take me to hospital. It was in the middle of all the COVID stuff. They didn't have a blanket on the bed, nowhere for Jamie to sit, and then they forgot us.
Was that at Nepean?
Yes, they've always been wonderful before. I will not ever say a word against
Yes.
Nepean.
They have been absolutely.
They are brilliant. They've always been brilliant. But that time, in emergency, on a cold winter's night, they forgot us and came and apologised. It was a long night, wasn't it? So, I'm near the end. Probably,
Nice.
probably
Mate, you're
pleased.
still alive.
I like it. I like that I'm still alive, Leslie. Because Jamie said that to me the other day, and I really am, and I discovered it. Now that sounds weird because I've always liked being alive, but I really discovered how much I liked it.
Yeah.
Yes, getting up in the morning is pretty cool because I still wake up, and going and opening the back door and there are trees, and nearly always early in the morning there are birds out there, and so I look at the birds and I just feel almost part of it. It's which I've not felt before, and it's very pleasing. And pleasing isn't anywhere near the right word, but in a way it is. Another thing I found myself doing is looking up a lot. I look up at the stars, I look up at clouds, and I look up at stars because every now and then we might see the space station, like I did this morning, and I rang Jamie, who was on his way to, I just saw the space station. I get quite excited. And we've also seen, I don't know if any of you have seen Elon Musk's, what are they? The satellites.
Can you see it? You can see them.
Yes.
Yeah, but don't forget where they live. You probably got us in Sydney. You wouldn't see much at all because you know you're
We're going to camp out
lucky
your
to
garden.
see stars. I mean,
Are you
you have a much
serious?
clearer
But
sky.
not that much higher. let's
No.
say. I suppose it's just clear.
It was
Pretty much,
clear,
yeah.
and Jamie's, it was a time of morning when the sun was rising. Now the
Yeah.
sun was still behind, it was still dark, but the sun would have been in the position because Jamie
What is it?
tells me that they reflect light. They're not
Oh.
lights, they reflect the light. So that's when they reflect the sun behind, they're up there, and so the sun rays. Is that right? Yeah, let's do that. And Jamie just sometimes happens to go to work at Sparrows.
Have you got a telescope?
I've got a little one.
So
We're camping out. Christmas in July in your back garden. We set the alarm at 3 o'clock, and by the time we have our coffee, it's 4 o'clock, and we'll watch this reflection. I can't believe it.
yes, it's
Wow.
there was a period about last month, I think, when we saw it 5 times in a
Is
row
that a
every morning.
twinkle? Is it like a twinkle?
No,
No,
it's like a string of lights, isn't it?
Elon Musk satellites are. There's a
Yeah.
number of them in
Really?
a row. There's a couple of dozen
I-
of them or so. And yeah,
I
they-
counted
well,
36 once.
Yes, and they go across the sky. The International Space Station, and you can see in Sydney.
Really?
Yes, it's bright enough to see here.
And what time was it in the morning?
It was 5-ish then, but
It-
that was
It
the-
changes all the time though. But the only time you can see satellites is about an hour and a half before sunrise and about an hour and a half to 2 hours after sunset.
Oh my goodness.
So it's the
Okay.
time when it's
Yeah.
dark enough, but the sun is still hitting the satellites up there
Right.
and reflecting. So they look like a very bright star. So they're not twinkling. But yeah.
but they go across. The first time I saw them
They
was
move.
yes,
Very quickly.
was it happened to be my birthday last year, and I had no idea what they were, and I wondered. I looked things up like small planes. Were they out doing some sort of what? Figuring something, doing something in coordination or whatever. I sometimes lose words.
We
Um,
all do that.
Whether anyway, it's annoying sometimes.
Wow.
But it's wonderful to see them. I get really excited.
Well, you got us excited. So do you stay in your kitchen window?
No,
Oh,
it was
where
out
is-
on the footpath. I was out on the footpath every time I've
Ah.
seen them.
Right.
Or the first time I think I'd gone and opened the back door or something, and I saw them coming across, and they were coming across the house, so I bolted through the front door and watched
Wow.
them. But this time they've been going almost the same time, but one was going east to west, another was going south to north.
How do you know they're Elon Musk's satellites?
Because he's the only one that has strings of satellites.
All right.
And
Or-
they look
Oh.
like fairy lights
Yes.
on a Christmas tree strung
Yeah.
together and follow each other. So
The richest man in the world now.
so
No, Jeff Bezos.
Yes, Jeff Bezos.
Jeff Bezos
So-
is the one who is selling the flights to space.
yes,
Mm,
yes. I think somebody's bought one
yes, got one more.
for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Not me. I'm just watching.
You've got better things to do with your money. But yes, it's interesting. So yes, I do
Yes.
look up a lot more,
Mm.
but not just. But and I don't look up because of them. I happen to have seen them because I found myself looking up a lot more. I'm near the end here. But the other feelings I have, there's a feeling of expansion and place in the world. What is the time?
No, you've got plenty of time.
Quarter past.
There is this feeling of expansion and connection. So you're right. I feel everything is deeper, but in some ways, although I feel connected with things, there are times when I don't feel connected at all, and I don't feel. Some part of me is tuned out in my brain. You notice it, don't you? But so what else? Mostly appreciation, gladness, connection. I'm very aware of kindness, love, a desire for deeper curiosity and understanding. I'm very keen on understanding everything, and especially what happens with people and what is going on, in a way that I was always interested, obviously, but I find it quite important. And for me, because in understanding, you can choose how to deal with it things more appropriately. So that has been part of it. And this sense of connection and birds. My latest little thing is rescuing bees. There've been so many bees coming inside and they've got cold. So I either breathe on them or take them out into the sun. And there's a patch of rosemary, which has little blue flowers, which they like. And I take it down and put them in the sun. And suddenly they're lying there and then they go, whoop,
Yeah.
And off they go. And it's just such a delight. This tiny little critter, you know. And I enjoy doing that. I say 3 this morning. So there's a sort of something that was always there, but I'm just more aware of what perhaps there is something else that's happened too. It's given me a time to deal with all old stuff, and I didn't know that I was still cross about some things, perhaps that were 40 or 50 years or forever old. And it's given me the chance to work them through, because I don't want to be, it gives me the chance to understand. And I can understand more now because I know what I know now, more than I did then. So that's pretty big. And I also see it as a time of healing. And I'm not sure what I'm healing or whether it's just me I'm mending. When I was a child, I must have been in my teens, all my family had something really difficult and wrong with them. They all had something that they dealt with, from asthma and heart and all sorts of things of that level. And I can remember as a child vowing, it stops with me. Can you imagine it? Well, I don't know what's the word, arrogance, of someone saying, nobody will be sick after me. But it was probably a nice thing for a child to do. But I've thought of that a lot because I seem to have taken on quite a few of what everybody else had, except the asthma. And I think and even migraine is in the family, I've discovered, and I have a cousin who does the migraine.
And are you well, Jamie?
Mostly.
So that's it. But let's see if what I've said here is to finish off is worth saying.
Excuse me. Yeah.
Not really. It's just the potted version of my absent pave years. And they're elements of the story, and I like stories, and I think we need them, and they're part of how we make sense of the world, and how we make sense of ourselves, life, the universe, and everything through stories. So I've told you a little bit of mine, which I wouldn't have told you, I don't think, if Catherine hadn't said, will you come to pay?
You know, Catherine, you only have to say one word in this. Oh, will you come and speak next month? You know.
Yes.
Well, I think personally, I think it's
Oh,
a great
see?
shame that there weren't a lot more
Yes,
people
I
here.
know. That was
Because
fascinating.
yes, it's been very enjoyable hearing your story. I mean, not that you were sick, but
No,
the
but
way you've told it has been very entertaining.
Oh, thank you,
And
because
I'm
I
glad
was so
you're still
afraid
with
of
us.
it.
I'm glad you're still with us.
Thank you,
Yes,
Leslie. So am I.
Yes.
I'm here, and I'm here with you
Yeah.
guys. That's nice. Oh, can I just add one thing?
Yes, please do.
It's quite personal, and you've led me
Yeah.
from the appreciation of being able to say it, and there's something, you know, familiar, and that's nice about being here. But there is one thing that I haven't said, and I have written it down. Hang on, let's see if I can find it, or I'll just make it up. And, not make it up, it's the truth. But I've said that I'm not the same person that I was. when I stopped coming 7 years ago. But I've said something like that about my family and friends, that what has sustained me and are my friends and people who know me, but it's not, most people haven't known, and that's not what I've discovered. I've discovered just that you are, that they are, that just knowing they're there, and that has sustained me. But sorry, Jamie, going to acknowledge Jamie has seen me through thick and thin.
The loving
Yes,
brother.
you live together, I take it.
Yes, yes, yes.
Right.
We share a house in the mountains
Beautiful.
with Jamie and his family. I really have discovered, and I discovered this when I was in hospital and things were happening. I told my son Lewis when he was living in, where was he living? Laura. And he was having some health problems. Don't come, it's all right. I know you're there. That's all that matters, knowing you're there, knowing you are. And that's what my family and the boys, and just the fact that you are, is what has sustained me.
That's love.
Made it easy.
That's love.
The end.
And Lewis
Mum.
is now in Tasmania, isn't he?
Yes, he's been in Tasmania, what, 3 years? 4 years? No more, 4. And he's built a house,
Wow.
and he's got a little boy called Johnny who is 9, and they're having another baby
Oh,
in October.
might be able to go.
Yes. Jamie's got 2 boys who are taller than him by this much, and they're 13.
Oh, wow, really?
Yes.
Right, twins.
Yes.
Oh,
God.
Jamie has the
you all
twins.
live
Yes.
together.
From time to time we live together, and sometimes we don't. Is that about a good way of putting it? But we're always there. They're always there. Always there. I mean, always there in their being. Not always at the house, but a lot, fortunately.
That's a great way to live. I always thought all the houses in the mountains are so big. One could have the east wing and someone has the west wing with separate entrances.
I used to live in a
Because
house like that, yes.
It's
in the mountains.
awesome. That is so good. And you need that because it's so quiet in the mountains. But you still need to see people.
Oh, yes.
Mm.
Yes.
Very
So,
nice.
my story.
Thank
Well,
you for sharing.
Yeah.
Now, I was going to ask about Lifeline because it seems to be a big part of your life. And I think Lifeline does some amazing things. So how many years were you in Lifeline? It's amazing.
7, I think.
Wow.
It was Leslie who introduced me to Lifeline
Wow.
because she was already doing it
Right.
and inspired me. We had an evening without Catherine, didn't we? And we went into the Parliament sitting, and who was it? The Reverend somebody who, and you
Fred
told
Nile.
Oh, Fred Nile.
Fred Nile, and you
Oh,
said,
no, not Fred.
not
Nile.
Fred, but you, whoever,
It was
the connection with Lifeline.
I forgot. He was another ex-member of Parliament that was running Wesley Mission.
And you
Gordon
said,
Moyes.
Gordon
Oh,
Moyes.
yes, yes,
He
yes.
became an MP, but he was the head of Lifeline at one
Yes.
stage, Wesley Mission.
And
Yes.
Leslie said to me, I'm a member of Lifeline,
Yeah.
and it sparked.
I think they do some amazing things.
Yes.
Yeah,
Especially
I
the
did it for
COVID.
5 years, and then Julie did it for even longer than I
Yeah.
did in the end.
Wow.
And I have relatives who I've discovered did it even longer. My uncle, I discovered afterwards. He's no longer in the world and wasn't when I discovered it, but he set up Lifeline in Tasmania.
Oh,
He
really?
and my cousin and
Wow.
Nick, Robin Nandan, and my uncle Philip, who you never met, and Nick actually physically set it up and worked for it in Tasmania for eons.
I think it's changed a lot. Though.
Yeah.
It has.
It was
Yeah.
changing
My
when I
father
was
very
there,
on Lifeline.
It was-
Yeah.
which is probably why I didn't
You were with
continue.
My father.
Oh, your father did
For
like.
many years. And he did it with a lot of nurses from RPA.
Mm.
Some of the nurses, they were all
Oh,
members of
wow.
Lifeline.
What I liked about it when I joined, and I don't know if you felt this sort of thing, Leslie, was that it was local. The first calls, I was at Balgowlah, and the first calls would come in, they would be local calls, and if they
Yeah.
couldn't, it went round, they went to the next one, but it might have been out of area. And I loved the fact that it was local. And
Now I think it's just all in one central. Just
well, yes,
you
when
could be
I was
talking to
there,
somebody in Broken Hill.
when I was there with the helpline, they experimented with
Yeah.
people from the helpline
Mm,
to keep the calls down to 20 minutes
yeah.
and to go Australia-wide.
I think
And
it's more. of
it
a
was the
referral
hardest
service.
Well,
work.
that's what it's become.
Yes.
They've modelled it on the actual. That was the DV
Yeah.
line we had to do. You had to just
Yeah.
20 minutes. You really try and ease them off and refer them on.
Mm.
To where?
Or to services that can actually,
Yes.
because Lifeline was really more counselling and referral thing. They'd have to refer them to either a refuge or I don't know, somewhere where they could actually get some further help and
Yes.
support. That's what the domestic violence line was. But actually, I don't know I don't know where Lifeline's supposed to refer people to now.
They must have a list. one assumes.
There was.
Mhm.
Oh, is it time to stop the meeting online?
Well, is
Is
there any on there?
anybody online?
No.
Oh,
No.
sorry.
No, might as well.
Yeah, it was sad because we used to get